the age of 19 in 1962, she was
but I have the files. You know, I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, how can that be possible? You know, pistols and final slap of choice, and the internet, professional wrestlers, and not just Ventura style. It doesn't matter where the information comes from as long as it's real. It's hard to get real information because seriously, they don't want you to just read two together whenever I try to prove out, you know. It's not. If you expect your government to tell you the truth, you're going to sadly disappoint another one of these things.
Dear Lord, what a dirty old man.
Really? You can't be serious. Is this really how you want things to be? Come on. More hooker, eruptions, eruptions, whatever.
Like Dave Powers kind of.
Really?
Allegedly broadcast live from Pima Region 2. Within the borders of the formerly united and currently occupied states of America, we bring you the Ochelli Effect.
Damn sure no, I'm an original.
We have all these situations. I'd love to know why it takes 50 years.
That's that.
For a 19-year-old girl to eventually get up the gumption to put these things out. And so it is Tuesday night, 6 p.m. Eastern, and that means you're live again on UCY.TV radio. This is the Ochelli Effect. So, oh boy, man. You know, that intro, it gets a little bit more obnoxious in my headphones every single time, and it's always balanced differently. It's so funny. And the worst part is I did it to myself. Anyway, tonight we got two guests, both of them involved in the Liberty Beacon. And, of course, all of my listeners have now begun to familiarize themselves with Roger Landry. And, we also had one show already where we were with, Terry Joyce. But first, we have Roger Landry joining us. How you doing today, Roger?
Always doing good when I get a chance to talk to you, Chuck.
Boy, I appreciate that, because I'll tell you, it's been a trying week. And it's been a fascinating sort of week on, many fronts, Roger. We did say last week that we were going to discuss the Colorado project, and the website was in the midst of being, constructed or getting ready to be published. I'm not sure which. How are we coming along with that so far?
Well, we had intended on putting the website, live yesterday, but what we're trying to do, and again, I discussed this last week, we're trying to put up a mechanism of donation that does not involve anybody giving us any money, because there's way too much of that going on the internet, way too many scams. So we're setting up a mechanism whereby people can actually contact the vendors in the local area in Colorado and donate to an account whereby we can only go in and say it's a hardware store and walk out with the hardware we need to facilitate the project, or a lumber yard, or a grocery store, because again, for the first couple of months, we won't have a crop in. We'll be planting a crop at the beginning of June. So however people wish to donate, we want them to be able to call a vendor and put money on an account that we will never see a penny of that. We will only see the product, whether it be tools to facilitate the project, whether it be materials to facilitate the project, or whether it be food to keep us alive until we get the first crop in. So getting the actual list together and the vendors together and getting a mechanism worked out so that we can facilitate this in easy enough fashion that people won't get frustrated was a little bit more complicated than what we had initially thought. So we're looking at either more than likely tomorrow about this time or a little bit later, bringing the site live. But it will be up within the next 24 to 48 hours at the most. We just want to be able to present something that is a usable tool from the get-go. We don't want to put something up that's not functional or that is in such a fashion of disarray that we're turning people away, because once you go to a website, if you don't like what you see, there's a 70% chance or better you'll never return to that site. So I'd much rather delay the site 24 to 48 hours and make it a usable, functional site that people can go to and without confusion or without the sense of disarray from the get-go, than to put it up now and facilitate any of these bad feelings towards the site. So we're looking at either tomorrow or the latest Thursday morning. But yeah, we're making good progress on that.
So in other words, we don't want to make a sort of mini Obamacare mess, in other words, where you have the Unusable Affordable Care Act site and all that other mess that went on.
You know, I had the highest regard for you until you used me in the same sentence with Obamacare.
Oh, I'm sorry. You know,
I have written a half a dozen scathing, blistering articles on Obamacare. And believe me, I have an in-your-face writing style. And when people ask me, why do you write with such a blatant in-your-face style? Because in order to be heard, you can't whisper in a crowd. And I honestly believe that. There are so many untruths. There is so much misdirection, so much blatant lies out there, so much of it, that it is a crowd around you. And if you wish to be heard, you can't whisper in that crowd. So when I write a commentary, especially, not so much an article which deals a lot with facts, but when I write a commentary or how I feel about any given topic, it will be in your face.
well, you know, intensity and passion are a matter of necessity when it comes to such important issues. So there's no reason in the world for you to even answer that question as to why, you know, you're so in your face about these issues, because the issues themselves are really in all of our faces, whether we understand it or not. So, you know, you have to meet, you have to meet the negative force with an equally positive force in order to even begin to engage it. So, I mean, it's a guarantee that that's the way that stuff's going to go, you know. But I was only referring, of course, to the IT disaster that happened with that.
Oh, yes.
I mean, you know, we don't have. Go ahead.
Chuck, that's just one of the biggest jokes there is out there. We're talking about a government with unlimited funds. We're talking about a government project, okay, Obamacare, that is going to add trillions upon trillions of dollars to the U.S. deficit. We're talking about projects that seem to get unlimited funds dumped into them, but yet you and I can get a website up that's working great on the first shot, and we've got a government with unlimited funds because all they need to do is go to the Fed, to the printing press, and say, print me another $1 trillion, and bang, bang, there it is. But yet they can't get a website up and functioning properly in months.
Yeah. What else can you say about that? I mean, it's just, there's no, I mean, I know there's the whole argument about there's the lowest bidder concept and all that, but the reality is that they could hire 20 of the lowest bidders, and one of them is bound to get it right. And like you said, I mean, you know, when you're dealing with the same people that are printing the money, well, you know, where is the limitation really? So that's just all that was, though. It's just kind of a slap at that at least, you know, you're trying to do an honest project, and you're willing to make sure that, listen, I'll even wait a few more days or a few more, whatever it takes, because I'd much rather get out there with something that's usable, workable, and direct to the point, instead of wasting people's time with, you know, debating as to whether, you know, a program is whatever and whatever, when we can't even get a simple website functioning properly. And then, of course, the whole organizational problem with that, and having the separate websites and everything else, it was just, you know, complete disaster. But,
you can't convince me that there is any excuse for this at all, because the Liberty Beacon Project has 12 websites up globally. And we have blogs up, and we have radio shows going, and we can put a website up and have it functioning, well, okay, to the point where it is very easy to utilize. And we can do that for under $100. Now, it's been estimated that well over $16 million, and I would say well over $20 million has been spent on this. Who's the lowest bidder? Has been spent on this Obamacare website, and it's still messed up. All right, what's the difference between me doing this in my little home in the middle of the prairie in northern Montana with extremely limited resources and the government with unlimited resources and the lowest bidder being $16 million? I just, it doesn't work for me. But that right there puts our government into perspective, doesn't it?
Well, obviously, the point there that I take from that is that you actually care about the project and the information that you are participating in, and the people that put this particular project out, and seemingly every single project that has to do with public interaction, simply do not care about the overall results of what they are actually doing. So that's what it comes down to for me.
It does. You're right.
And it's just a disgusting illustrative,
it's
illustrative
par for the
point.
Course.
Yeah, it is par for the course too. And it's sad. It's very, very sad because, look, if suddenly I had $16 million, believe me, I could get a whole lot more than one web network working properly,
I would say that it just screams volumes so much higher than that. But I actually found it to be quite advantageous to all of us who rail against Obamacare. Because with the site not functioning properly and people not being able to sign up and so on and so forth and get the appropriate information they need, at one point, if you called a particular number that was advertised, you ended up by getting onto a porn site. There was actually a story about that, and there was a lot of truth to it. So, when you see something like this happening, it doesn't bode well for a project so many of us, or a program that so many of us think is absolute evil to start with. So again, when I say par for the course, it actually was. And it facilitated a lot more negative feelings towards the program itself, which does nothing but help people like me who rail against it. It just helps people more easily absorb our point of view on the entire subject.
Well, right, and I mean, we almost need to thank them for that debacle.
Oh yeah, I did. I sent them a letter saying thank you.
Oh, wow. And I'm watching in the primary season locally here because in North Carolina, that whole campaign is well underway. And I'm watching the attempts to paint people as conspiracy theorists and the sort of volleying back and forth over the Affordable Care Act that's going on in the campaign literature and commercials as they're hitting the ground. And it's just this is going to continue to echo for some time. So they've done a long-term favor for people like us that discuss how, this type of control and this type of participation from our, supposed government is not in our best interests.
I really, I get set back and I get angry when I hear those who would push back against what we try to tell the truth about, because they constantly label us as conspiracy theorists. And that term really gets under my skin, because when I founded the Liberty Beacon Project, in the very beginning on day one, the one thing that I wanted to put forward is that we would always have credibility. When we railed about a subject, when we ranted about a subject, we needed to have sufficient information to prove unequivocally whatever we were saying was backed by fact. So when you call me a conspiracy theorist because I rail or I rant against Obamacare, or I rail or I rant against the elite, or I rail or I rant against the loss of our privileges, we've been granted privileges, the loss of our freedoms and rights in this country, when you call me a conspiracy theorist because I rant or rail against that, It is you who are falling down and not doing your homework. Because if you hear me rail or rant about it, contact me. I will flood you. I will virtually flood you with enough information to convince you beyond a shadow of a doubt, or you're a paid shill. It's one or the other. So we're not conspiracy theorists. We're conspiracy factualists, because yes, these are conspiracies. They are, in fact, conspiracies, but it's not based on a theory. It's based on fact. So that term really gets to me, Chuck. It really does.
Listen, me too, and it's absolutely true. I mean, look, just from a plain logical standpoint, okay, just to imagine that, let's just say that it's not as nefarious, just for a moment. Let's just say that it's not quite as nefarious as you and I seem to see it.
All right, I'll try.
You know, just give it a moment. Just try. Yeah, I know it's hard, but try. And what'll happen is, even if you consider that there is nothing negative going on here, okay? Let's just remove the idea of negativity and defensiveness from it. Okay. The amount of things that are going on, even if you considered that everything was a good thing, and I mean, your fluoride's good for you, your GMO food is good for you, all of that stuff. I know.
My imagination here.
I know, but just 30 more seconds, Roger. I promise you, I'll stop hurting your head in 30 seconds.
All right.
Okay? Here's the thing, though. Let's just say all of that is good for you. All of these things are good for you. Obama cares about you. Everybody loves you. The Bushes love you. It's all a good thing. Here's the problem. In order for there to be a conspiracy, all it means is that individuals are acting together toward the same end. So no matter what, the word conspiracy is not a bad word. It's actually, from its Latin roots, meaning to breathe together, okay? There is nothing negative in the word itself.
Oh, but it has definitely been beaten and pounded and shaped into a negative.
Oh, yeah, misuse.
I agree.
Yeah, the misuse and mischaracterization of the idea of conspiracy. I mean, listen, our founding fathers essentially had a conspiracy against the British Crown, if you think about it.
No, they did.
But that's not even giving any sort of judgment about it, positive or negative. It's a simple fact of reality that they conspired together to release the colonies from the British, did they not?
Yes.
So
now,
go ahead.
Let me give you a little bit of truthful satire about that. Since 2001, since 9/11, anybody who spoke out and said that the government was involved in 9/11, that certain aspects of the government were aware of 9/11, that certain aspects of the government were actually involved in the mechanisms of 9/11.
That means whether it was let it happen on purpose, made it happen on purpose, just simply...
Well, we're talking about like the elites who own the building for the first time in I don't know how many years having breakfast somewhere else. Which is something they never did. But anyway, let's just move along in this train of thought because I don't want to take up too much time on this particular point here.
Okay.
All the way up through about a year ago, anybody who spoke out and said that the government was involved in some fashion or another in the mechanism of 9/11 was considered a conspiracy theorist. But there was a study that came out that stated, and all you have to do is Google this, that there are so many people after all this time that actually do consider that we are being lied to about 9/11, that the 9/11 Commission report is built on lies and falsehoods, that so much of this is bogus, that it is easily recognizable at this point. What this study pointed out was that nowadays, since such a vast majority of the population do believe that there is some involvement there with the 9/11 mechanism, that it is the people who believe the government story at this point who are now considered the conspiracy theorist. This is a fact. So
Yeah.
The role reversal has marched right on in. It's not you and me who are the conspiracy theorists anymore. It is the people who believe the government who are now the conspiracy theorists, just due to the fact that they are now a minority. The majority is never considered conspiracy theorists. It's always the few who speak out against the tyranny of the many or the powerful.
That is true, and the official histories are only written by the victors. So,
true.
There you go. Well, I understand you don't want to get any further bogged down. I'm sure we could spend hours just discussing this.
Oh, yeah.
But
and there's a myriad of topics buried within that little conversation right there.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But I do know that you had some other things on your mind recently. Cause I was watching, some of your recent posts, and I know they're not all written by you, but I was watching, some of the recent posts on the Liberty Beacon. And you know what else? I did forget. I don't know if I mentioned it last time, but the Falling Darkness as well.
Yes.
Thefallingdarkness.com. I think it's all one word, right?
The Falling Darkness. All one word.
Right.
Just like the Liberty Beacon is all one word when you type it in. And yes, that is just like the Liberty Beacon website, which is our flagship, our original website, is the center of the Liberty Beacon project. By definition, the Falling Darkness is the edge of the Liberty Beacon project. And by the edge, I mean that's where we take these stories to the extremes, but never stepping over the boundary of truth. So it is where you will find the stories that have a bit more edge to them. It is where we will do a little bit more ranting, a little bit more railing against specific topics, and where the facts are a little bit more in your face. It's more of a specialized site, whereas the Liberty Beacon is a general newspaper type site.
Right. I definitely noticed there being a slightly sharper sort of attitude to the stories that were coming from the Falling Darkness, and that's why I wanted to make sure I mentioned it, because that's more to my to my mindset. Let's just say that's more on my harmonic level as far as where I go with these things. To be honest with you, not everything, obviously, but when I do find articles that are particularly poignant, I do appreciate the attitude difference on the Falling Darkness. It's a little more to my heart, I guess, and the Liberty Beacon is a little more to my mind.
And you know what? That's exactly the way it was intended, and you put that just so eloquently, Chuck. You really did, because that is the intention.
But I do advise anybody who has heard it before or has heard me before to go check those two sites, both of them out. But the Falling Darkness is probably, like I said, more one of those things. If you got a little more of a passionate feel for things, you're going to want to go there. But anyway, I'm sorry. I just remembered that before, and I knew that I didn't personally say anything about it the last couple of times that I've had you on. So I wanted to make sure I covered that with you.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Anyway, so we now know that, you're actually going to take your time and do the job right when it comes to getting the mechanism together for Colorado. So this is a good thing. I was hoping that we'd be pointing people toward the website, but perhaps by the time I go on air Thursday, I'll be able to do that, or by next week, one or the other. We'll have that site up and running, and we'll be able to talk about that and how it's going. But obviously there's tons of stuff out there in the news and things that are going on. And, I just give the floor to you right now, Roger, because I'm wondering just what's on your mind. Cause every time I ask a question very openly with you like that, where I just sort of say, what's on your mind, Roger? I know that I'm going to go somewhere I want to go. So.
Well, I'm on a bit of a rant lately about genocide. And I realize that that's a term when it initially pops out of your mouth, a lot of people's eyes open up wide and they push back a little bit and they're like, what is he going to say? I wrote an article yesterday. I believe the title was Robotic Bees. While mankind plays God, the world is dying. And that was just one portion of this topic. When I talk about genocide, I'm not talking about us marching into a country or lobbing nuclear bombs and destroying the planet. When I talk about genocide, I'm talking about the slow death of humanity. And not all of humanity, but a vast portion of it. And anybody who's done any research on the Georgia Guidestones knows that the elites believe that this planet should never support more than 500 million people to be in harmony with nature. All right. Anybody who has done any research, and I'm very fond of saying this, knows for a fact that you can take every living human being on this planet today and put them on a landmass the size of Australia and give them all a very comfortable house to live in, every family, a good-sized yard, the whole 9 yards, not crowd anybody in, and leave the rest of the entire planet empty. So we are not overpopulated. So if you need, or if you feel the need, and not meaning when I say you, not you or me, but those who would play God on this planet, those that we tend to term the elite because that's what they believe themselves to be. It's not a mechanism of too many people. It's a mechanism of control. It's much, much easier to control 500 million or 1 billion people than it is to control 7.5 billion people. So what mechanisms are being used as genocide against the population of this planet? And well, there are. Go ahead.
One thing, Roger. You know what it is that really makes people's eyes roll about the word genocide is that it is generally seen as one of these sort of ethnic divisions where one group of people decides to exterminate another group of people based on a land struggle, a religious struggle. Genocide is often associated with either third world nation problems. Or maybe they talk about, the Holocaust or some other, maybe the genocide of a particular tribe in Africa, the genocidal behavior of like the Pol Pot regime, things like that. And they don't think about it on the larger scale. It is a large scale word. It's not something that is easily thrown around, but it is often thrown around as one of these sort of red flag words that just sort of disturbs the mind of the person that doesn't really do the research, like you said. So this is where the limitation of the word, it's a very large word. It means a great deal more than people have tried to utilize it for. So it's one of those semantic problems where the word has been misused so much that people don't entirely internalize the true meaning of it. So you're about to go into the true meaning of that word.
Well, yeah, and a lot of what you described as far as defining the word is still so true and fits exactly into what I'm about to describe, because we have a select few, and they have selected themselves, we have not selected them, a select few who believe it is their right and their birthright, basically, to rule this planet. And it is them who feel that we, the cattle, the eaters, the users of resources, that serve very, very little purpose to them, that we are who they need to pare down, to cull the herd, to perform genocidal mechanisms on us. And this is what's happening. Now, what are those mechanisms? Let's stop and talk about that, okay? Because I'm going to tell you what these mechanisms are. And anybody who doesn't feel that I can prove this, there is on YouTube, Awake Radio has a 26 episode series that I have done on GMOs, vaccines, and geoengineering. And each and every one of these is a mechanism of genocide, of culling populations. I published an article not too long ago about GMOs. It's, I believe, and I'm not exactly sure what the exact title on the article is, but basically it's using GMOs for genocide. And if you stop and do some research on GMOs, you will find several hundred peer-reviewed papers that are telling you blatantly that GMOs do cause sterility. How do they cause sterility? They basically kill sperm. Okay? And this is part of the mechanism of the genetically modified organisms. This is the mechanism of insecticide that is literally built into every cell of this plant. And now there's also bioengineered toxins like Roundup, which Monsanto has, and it's being used all across this planet on crops everywhere. And it is a known killer of sperm. And every time I tell these stories about GMOs and genetically engineered biotoxins killing sperm or making men sterile, I have women come back to me and they send me messages and they say, yeah, but it ain't doing nothing to us. Let me tell you something, Mama. It takes two to dance. It takes two to tango. Mm-hmm. If the men can't have babies, the women can't either. So you only have to make half of us sterile in order to cull the herd.
That's an absolute fact. And you know what? Speaking of women, actually, Terry Joyce has joined us on this conversation as well, Roger.
Oh, Terry is she is such a joy to talk to. How are you, Terry?
Oh, I'm doing really well, and it's such a pleasure to talk to you too, Roger, and you too, Charles. I was just listening to your conversation, and I find what we're doing, like what you're doing, is so brave to expose these truths, even in the face of such denial still out there. And I heard a little bit like being labeled a conspiracy theorist, and it's like, no, this is not a theory anymore. It's a fact. And it's that label is of course we all know is dispelling what the truth really is. And speaking of that, I actually had the opportunity to interview some people out at Bundy Hill, in Nevada.
Yep.
And and that's another situation where the media has taken certain things and made it appear a certain way when there's a really strong underlying truth that I do believe, as you mentioned before, it's connected to Agenda 21.
Oh yes. Oh, of course it is. And let's talk about genocide. Let's talk about Agenda 21 because they're plugged into the same socket.
Yep, yeah. They sure are. And, I'll tell you something else, just as a quick note, as far as the media and the misdirection of all these things. And believe me, I want to hear what you have to say about Agenda 21. But I'll tell you something personally that happened to me over the past couple of weeks. We all know that we're kind of, somewhat fixated on the situation in the Ukraine. Okay? So I decided that I would make contact, since I had a few people in my, let's just say, contact list that live in the either the Russian Federation or in the Ukraine or in other countries which are now satellites to that whole area. And I decided to talk to them. Now, first thing was I think it was maybe 2 weeks ago, Putin goes to Belarus. So I decided to talk to two people in Belarus to see. And they were in Minsk, by the way, where Putin had supposedly gone. And I talked to them just to see if there was changes in his security and things like this, because that sort of fascinates me, because it gives you an indication of what the footing of a nation is when they start to increase security and things like this, okay? So I hope I'm not boring you guys with this, but here's the thing. They are sitting in the city where Putin is supposed to be. They don't see him there. They don't see the added security. They don't see anything remotely resembling what a head of state would bring with them when they come into a city. So I say to myself, well, maybe I'm looking at something on a delay. Maybe I misunderstand what I'm seeing here. He's supposed to be in that city as I'm trying to talk to these people. Now, I made other inquiries about other situations that I'm seeing reported in our media here and internationally. And I'm finding that the people on the ground are not telling me the same story, not even remotely in most cases. I mean, some of it is exactly as they say, but they're mixing it with disinformation. I mean, a complete lack of facts, a complete lack of these incidents actually happening. And I'm finding this out from people that are standing there looking at with their eyes on the situation, with their bodies literally in the place that they're talking about on the news. And I checked with another friend who has contacts over there, and they told me the same thing. Now, I'm an independent guy. I don't have a large budget. I don't have a staff. I'm just doing this on my own. You've got to keep in mind when it comes to the mainstream, they are going to not only lie to you directly, but they're going to take some facts, some truth, and sprinkle it in with all of the propaganda. And that includes this Bundy situation, that includes GMOs, that includes all of these things. They don't just lie to you straight away so that it's an easily provable lie. They actually sprinkle the truth in with it.
Well,
so,
you got to go a step further than that, because this is going to sound like I'm sticking up for the mainstream media, but I'm actually not. Just hear me through here, okay?
all right.
Because you both made, Terry, both you and Charles have made really, really good points. But let's stop and think here, okay? The mainstream media does not originate lies. They don't sit down and say, okay, this is the way we're going to say this, and we're not going to tell the truth about this, and we're not going to tell the truth about this. The mainstream media has long passed, a long time ago, a generation ago. The mainstream media used to research everything that came out of their mouths. They needed to back it up with facts, just like the Liberty Beacon Project does. We won't rant or rail against anything unless we can prove it. Otherwise, we have zero credibility. And that was what investigative reporting was. Investigative reporting does not exist anymore. They are script readers. And who do the scripts come from? They come from the government and the elites who own these companies. So you can't go to the Dan Rathers of today. You can't go to the whoever. And I don't even know, because I don't watch the mainstream media news at all. Not even Fox News anymore. You can't go to these anchor people and say they're lying, because they're not lying. They're reading a script that was handed to them. They do no investigative researching at all. But to say they and themselves are lying, no. What they're doing is propagating a lie that was handed to them as a script. And that script comes from the elite who hand it down to our government, and because they own the government, and the government who hands it to the mainstream media. So to say that the mainstream media is making up these lies, I would push back against that. To say they're reading a script of lies, I agree with you 100%.
You know what, Roger? I stand absolutely corrected. Because the bottom line here is that journalistic integrity is no longer part of the program. That's what it is.
Well, investigative journalism is dead. That's the problem.
The ones who do real journalism, though, for example, Michael Hastings with Rolling Stone, they do end dead.
Yes.
Yeah. So
there are people out there that do investigative journalism. As a matter of fact, anybody who contributes something to the Liberty Beacon Project, the first thing we do is we check out their sources. We make sure what they've written has truth to it. These are people who are doing, and it's not the alternative media. We are not an alternative. We are the new media. We will supplant the mainstream media. But we're not an alternative as in, this is the best media, and this is the alternative. No. We are the new media, and that word alternative hooked up with media and associated with people like you, Joyce, and people like you, Chuck, and people like the Liberty Beacon Project, that gets under my skin, and we need to stop using that word alternative. We're not. We are the new media.
I like that.
I agree with you, Joyce, definitely.
I'm going to use that phrase now.
I try to use it often. And every time I say alternative media, I go, excuse me, I didn't mean that.
Yeah, that's going to take a little bit of training on my part, because I've gotten used to the idea of alternative media. You too, Terry?
Yes, so have I. Yeah. And everything alternative. Like, I've always been alternative comedy. You know, it's like, I like saying the word new instead now. I'm not alternative. I'm just new.
That's it. And the thing of it is, we have, and the Supreme Court has backed us up on this, we have every bit as much a right to do investigative journalism and present it to the people as anybody who works for MSNBC, Fox News, NBC, ABC, and the Supreme Court has backed that up. So we are not an alternative. We are, in fact, just as valid as any MSM anchor person is, and the Supreme Court will tell you that.
Well, I can't argue with you again, Roger.
That's true.
That's where I get quiet for a few seconds, and sometimes people say to me, you know, you get quiet during certain shows, and you know what it is? When somebody actually says something that resonates with me and hits me, I'm listening. I'm not listening waiting to jump in to respond. I'm actually listening and taking it in. So it does take me a moment to start to think about speaking again.
Well, that's appreciated, my friend. It is.
Well, even as an entertainer, you know, I worked in the old media. I called it the old media.
I like that.
Nice.
I worked in the old media, and you're basically a slave to perpetuating their agenda. And so it's refreshing, and I love the fact that there's another place to go to where you're freer to express yourself and have a platform to speak in and create in.
And set your own agenda.
Yes. Yeah. And I feel that I have integrity in it now. When you become aware and awake of what's really happening and to continue to do it, I can't live with that right now at all. It's like going to Walmart.
Oh, yeah. God.
And independence.
I was asked to do a show. I apologize, Chuck. Just let me get this out real quick. I was asked to do a radio show about 6 months ago, and it is a mainstream, and I won't mention who it is, because I promised them I wouldn't. I was asked to do a mainstream radio show, which is owned by one of the large networks. And, I agreed. And about 24 hours prior to the show, I got a call by producers. And what he told me was what I was allowed and what I was not allowed to say. Or what I could and what I could not discuss. Or how I could answer specific topics. And basically what I told him, I will not repeat because we have a lady on this show and we have ladies, I'm sure, listening to this show. What I basically told him was he could take a flying leap and so could his network, and hung the phone up. Because when you talk about an agenda, Joyce, and I mean, Terry, you hit it right on the head. They have sponsors who set specific guidelines. If you want my money, you will do this.
Yes.
If you want us to sponsor your show, you will live within these guidelines. If I'm sponsoring this particular show, then this is what you can and cannot discuss. So basically what you're doing by going on their forums is living within their constraints. The Liberty Beacon refuses to live within any constraints except the ones we set for ourselves. Our structure, our platform. And that platform is based on the truth. And if it's the truth, you can say it. Period.
I had an experience with my first experience with this kind of discrimination on the radio was over the topic of marijuana, and
really?
I was doing it was 2007, and I was doing a marijuana themed show up in Portland, Oregon, and it was one of the radio stations first. It was the radio station, and the radio station no longer exists anymore, actually. But it was a popular classic rock station, and we were doing a 420 celebration at the Bad Dag Theater, where originally a couple of their hosts were going to do the show, and we took over the venue and said, oh, we'll just invite them onto our show. Well, we wanted to go on the air and publicize it. Not only did we not get on the air ever, but they also banned their guests from being on the show because they said they found the subject matter to be offensive and it wasn't in line with the radio station. So I contacted a few papers and said, why is this offensive when Oregon was the first state to decriminalize marijuana in 1973, and this is a benefit for Oregon NORML? Well, it just fuel in the fire happened, and all of a sudden, a reporter from the Willamette Weekly wanted to do an article on it, and they did. And then there was even more things that happened, and the drama spread quite explosive. And then this is not the only time this has happened to me. I actually did another show recently in the state after it legalized marijuana recreationally, which was Washington. I did another comedy show, wanted to do advertisement in Richland, Washington. Again, a classic rock station. They were even using a picture from the Furry Freak Brothers with the title, "It's better to be broke and have good dope than to have money and not good dope," or something like that.
Yeah.
And they banned us from working with us as well. And it really became a standoff, and we ended up not getting good attendance. So again, I felt shut out from the radio on that subject matter, even in a state that legalized it. So, yeah, it's all controlled on every level.
When you have sponsors, okay, when people come in and say, I will give you money, and this is what you need to do for it, then what you have done is you have sold your soul to the devil. And this is what makes up the MSM. It is the huge amount of dollars, and it is the huge influence from the people who own. 94% of the mainstream media in this country is owned by 4 people. And on the board of directors for all 4 of those companies, they play musical chairs with all 4 of those companies. So it is one huge cabal. And it is all based on money and the ideology of the elites who own those companies. So when you deal with the mainstream media, you are dealing with a mechanism by which you have to live within constraints and boundaries. That's why the new media is catching on like wildfire, because you're never going to hear the things you're hearing on Charles Ochelli's show right now on the mainstream media. It's not gonna happen. Do you agree, Chuck?
Absolutely. There is no way that this kind of speech is going to be allowed on any of those networks, those organs that we've all gotten to know. And it doesn't matter the style of broadcast or that they've evolved to the internet age a bit. It really is irrelevant, because the control of the larger corporation, continuously putting many constraints on the broadcaster, causes the entire content to suffer. And you're right also about the script. I mean, that script is formed by committee in a way, because, first of all, you're not allowed to badmouth the sponsors. Okay, that seems reasonable. Then you're not allowed to talk about this and that, which is against the overall corporate image of the sponsor, and so on and so forth. And this is exactly how we wind up with a completely scripted media as opposed to free expression. So the fact that that shows like this and like this network are not constrained by our sponsors necessarily, we're trying to be responsible about things. And I do my very best to not bring anybody on the show who is making, let's just say, irresponsible remarks, who is going to make irresponsible statements. In other words, anybody that I bring on, I have to believe, and I have to be familiar enough to know that they're going to be honest about what they're saying, and that they're going to contribute something of value.
I not only agree with you, but I make it a point of habit. Have you ever listened to one of my rants, Charles?
Yes, I have.
Terry, have you ever listened to one of my rants, the Liberty Beacon rants?
Yes, I have.
Then you're going to be very familiar with what I'm about to say. I do rant. It's called a rant for a reason. Anything that really pisses me off goes on that show. I have no guests. I talk for 90 minutes, and I talk at a level of anger that absolutely strikes fear into the hearts of most people that listen. And I'm intentionally trying to make people angry. But one of the points I make over and over again, something I say over and over again, is I dare anybody to prove me wrong. Because if I'm going to rant about it like this, I better know what the heck I'm talking about. So I dare, I don't challenge, I dare people at least a dozen times over the course of a 90-minute show to prove me wrong. After 32 episodes of that show, not one single person has dissuaded or disproven any information we put out on that show. So it's a matter of credibility, because as soon as we start to follow the same pattern that we see in the mainstream media, as soon as we start to omit, maybe not lie about things, but just omit them from our conversation, as soon as we start to stray off of that path, then the credibility that is building the new media starts to evaporate, and then we are no better than what we are hoping to supplant. Would you agree?
I would agree with that.
Absolutely, and it is sad for me to observe that there are individuals that are supposedly part of the same sort of media that I am, that do not hold to these standards, and they're very easy to spot. We don't need to get into names or networks.
We discussed one right
else.
Before your show, didn't we?
We
no,
sure
I won't
did.
mention the name.
We sure did. Off the air, we did.
Yep.
We know what we're talking about here, but the thing is that there are individuals out there who do present themselves as honest broadcasters who are not.
Liberty-minded individuals. They stress that point.
Ostensibly, yes.
But you can discuss liberty, and you can have a show that is focused on liberty. But the tyranny doesn't come in through what you say. The tyranny comes in at what you don't say, what you won't cover, what you won't mention, what you won't support, what you omit intentionally. And there are a lot of people out there. And when I have challenged some of these people, why don't you discuss this? This is something of paramount importance that really needs to be discussed. Why don't you talk about this? Why do you omit this from your repertoire? And the answers I get back are total befuddlement. So tyranny doesn't necessarily mean lying. You can present tyranny through omission. And I see a lot of that. I do. Terry, would you say you see tyranny by omission?
You know what? I am not as experienced yet in looking at, I don't know. I'm very new to this media, so I don't know the individuals that would be doing that. But from what you're explaining, yes. And I really appreciate how you're saying it, because it again lets me know that this is what I need to do, is speak out what I believe to be true. Don't hold it back. Sometimes there's an element of fear that happens where I felt like, well, should I really go there? Are they is that, I do, cause I can watch it in my friends' faces, I'm like, but I shouldn't take their reaction as stopping me from actually coming out and saying what I feel is really true and perhaps happening in the world. There are topics that, I'm wanting to cover. I'm not sure if it is this way. For example, I did a show on Nazi bases in the Antarctic by a person that is an expert witness. You know, he's worked for the CIA and the NSA and Area 51 and things like this. Now, I can't say yes, you know, this is actually really happening, but let's look at the fact that maybe there has been some sort of historical connection between ETs and the Hitler regime. Or let's look at the possibility that maybe our government goes back that far. I haven't met one before, so I couldn't tell you on my end. But it's a topic that I find that there might be some truth in it. And therefore I want to present that to other people so they can use their own discernment and contemplate whether there is or isn't.
Well, as long as you're presenting this information from an objective viewpoint, okay? As long as you're telling people, I can't prove this, but you know what? We need to have an open enough mind to listen to the possibilities. Presenting information that is unprovable is not taboo, as long as you basically put that disclaimer out. Okay? And I have done that on many occasions. I basically said, you know what? I'm not an expert at this. I can't prove it one way or another. But I do believe that this could be important enough, and we should have an open enough mind that this is something we ought to consider. Now, what I've done is basically laid a framework for that discussion to continue without anybody being able to come back to me and say, well, you lied. Well, no, I didn't lie, because the first thing I told you is I can't prove this one way or another. But I do feel that it's pertinent enough that we ought to listen to it with an open mind. Chuck, I know you've been through this many times.
Well, yeah, and the thing is that, you know, when you present the testimony or the viewpoint of another person, I mean, you can be selective about that, obviously, so that you choose to bring on only people that you believe are credible. Yes. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you agree with everything they're saying. It just means that, look, this, I think, has some value. So I'm going to present this. I don't know, and I've said many times on the air that I'm not sure about that. But it does sound pretty good. Could you explain a little more about it? And I let them tell their own story. And you see, that allows a discussion to start to take place. Now, if somebody starts to say this is an absolute fact and that is an absolute fact, I often say, what is your proof for that?
Yes.
Where do you get that idea? Because I want to know what the source is. I want to know where it is you've come up with this particular conclusion. See,
As I do something a little bit strange, a little bit different, and again, I apologize for jumping in here, but you always make such great points, Charles. You really do. Whenever I do my rants, okay, which is my main show, I've probably in the last couple of years been on either guested or hosted over 1,000 shows. But when I do my rants in particular, every time I do a rant in the chat group, I put a list of links that covers all of the subject matter that I'm going to discuss with unequivocal proof of everything I'm putting out. And I make sure anybody listening to the show is aware, through my co-host, which is Paula Mathers, is aware that those links are available. If you don't believe anything I've said, you can refer back to those half a dozen links for each show, and you can see where the peer-reviewed proof or the peer-reviewed studies or the peer-reviewed papers are, and go straight to them and verify or validify whatever I've said. I think that's important. I really do. But there are a lot of times you take things on, you assume, okay? And it's not bad to assume. It really isn't. As long as you lay down that disclaimer, which we've already discussed. I can't prove this, but I believe it to be pertinent enough that we need to have an open mind and listen to this information.
Absolutely. And, you know, when it is always really instructive when you see individuals that make some very, you know, sort of exciting claims or some very inflammatory claims. And the question that stops a lot of them in their tracks, those who are being dishonest, because to me, it's not about truth necessarily when you're doing this. Sometimes it's about honesty. And there's a difference between honesty and truth, okay? But the fact is that when you present yourself in an honest way and you seek to bring people on that are going to present things in an honest way, it appears to me as though, mistakes can be made. Things can be misunderstood, but if you always sort of go back to, okay, this is your conclusion, okay, it sounds like a wild claim. I mean, to me, the idea of chemtrails and a lot of other things a few years ago, well, not a few years ago, but a while ago, some years ago, seemed to be wild claims. Now, I went to people that were discussing that stuff, and I said, show me where you got this and this and this from. And unfortunately for me and for my own emotional well-being at the time, they showed me. And I had, I sat there and I wanted to pull it apart. Believe me, every time I see something that is so wicked, so disturbing, so just, I don't know what other word to give it except evil in my mind, I want to find a way to not see the darkness. I really do. But unfortunately, most of the time, that's the way it is.
I would tell you that I understand your point of view and your feelings, more than your point of view, your feelings so well. Because let's talk about what a few years ago was considered to be conspiracy theories, okay? Chemtrails, GMOs, the evil in vaccines, perpetual warfare for the gain of the elites. All of this was considered to be four of the top conspiracy theories out there. I just did a 26-part show called The 4 Weapons of Mass Destruction Humanity May Not Survive. 26 90-minute episodes, of which we discussed. And the 4 weapons of mass destruction humanity may not survive were perpetual warfare, GMOs, vaccines, and chemtrails or geoengineering. And I put out over 1,000 links in those 26 episodes to peer-reviewed studies. So basically what we did was we shot holes in anybody's blowback that we were discussing conspiracy theories. Because none of this is a theory anymore. And anybody who feels it is needs to climb out of their isolation or their comfort bubble, like I call it, because basically what you have done is you have bent reality in such a fashion that it allows you to continue to feel that you're free. Or it allows you to continue to feel that you're safe when you are not. So you are the conspiracy theorist, not Terry Joyce, not Charles Ochelli, not Roger Landry or the Liberty Beacon. You are, because you've refused to believe or even consider or do any research on the subjects where we can prove unequivocally that these are not theories anymore. So you are now the conspiracy theorist, not us. By definition, you are.
The only thing that jumps out at me from those 4 points you just gave is I think you're actually missing one.
Well, that was the only 4. I wasn't going to do a 30-part series, so I had to stop it somewhere. Okay.
I think you're missing.
There's a lot more than that.
Oh, I know. But to me, there's one more very important, and I mean just as important and interactive, because all of those things cooperate together.
Yes.
They're
all part of the same mechanism.
Absolutely, but there's just one part of it that I think is being ignored sometimes by people, and that is the overall psychological operation. What I call the psychosocial program.
Yes.
I almost added psychiatry into that, and psychiatric and psychotropic drugs. I almost added Big Pharma as the 5th. But there was another one I could add after that, and I had to stop it somewhere. But when you consider that 100 million, roughly, Americans are on mind-altering prescription drugs, and that the biggest killer in this country is psychotropic and psychiatric drugs. I'm not kidding. More deaths per year. Oh yes, more deaths per year. over 100,000 people die each year from psychotropic or psychiatric drugs overdoses, or and close to over 700,000 people die a year from misdiagnosed or misprescribed drugs. It is the biggest killer in our country.
Actually, and you know what else is absolutely true, and this is probably really going to mess things up in people's minds, but I've seen more than one study that confirms this, okay? The top 5 illicit street drugs do not account for as many deaths as the legally prescribed pharmaceutical drugs do in this country.
One step further. One step further.
Go ahead.
Legally prescribed drugs account for way more deaths per year than all illegal drug deaths combined. All illegal drugs.
I was waiting for you to go there.
By the way,
again,
no one's ever died from smoking marijuana. No one's ever
OD'd
from smoking marijuana.
I would like to try
it.
Terry, I would love to try and do a pot OD. I think that would be fun as hell.
Yeah,
Just trying it would be fun. Give me a stack of brownies as tall as my house. I'll munch until I blow up.
Well, when I see you in Colorado, we'll make it happen.
Oh, that's right. It's legal in Colorado. So is hemp.
Yes.
But guys, I gotta go. So let me give you my swan song here. And, Chuck, I know what we can talk about next week. And I'm not sad that we didn't get a chance to do it because I really loved the way the conversation and the direction the conversation went in today. And I absolutely adore you, Terry. And the fact that you jumped into the conversation today just absolutely made my day. But next week, we're going to talk about genocide. And I have some facts. You talk about things that you try to avoid because they scare the living hell out of you. Well, I can guarantee you won't sleep after your show next week. Oh. And I might even be able to do more than an hour next week because that's going to take a little bit more than an hour to discuss. But I want to thank you so much because I know that you always dedicate this show to the Liberty Beacon Project each week, or at least a good portion of it. And for that, we need to tell you how much you're appreciated. And Terry, every time I get a chance to talk to you, it just improves my day in magnitudes. So I want to thank you both for this experience, and I wish you both a very pleasant day.
Oh, thank you. And you as well, Roger. I feel I've gained so much more knowledge. Even though I know some of this material, you bring new stuff to the table.
Every single time that I hear from you, Roger, I hear something new. So I appreciate everything that you've said, and it's very easy to dedicate this amount of time to yourself and to the Liberty Beacon because it is very much a part of what it is that I am working toward myself. So I'm more than happy to do this every week, and I thank you, sir.
Well, you're both very much appreciated, and again, good night.
Take care.
Good night.
Oh, so there we go. All right. Terry, you know, it is always eventful with Roger. He gets so very passionate and so very into what he's saying. And yeah, I did knock him off track on we were going to discuss the concept of genocide, and we just went off into another direction. And I have a tendency to do that. I just, you know, I don't plan out what I'm doing. I just sort of allow the conversation to evolve, and it just always seems to go somewhere.
So it's easy to do, especially when there's just so much information out there, and I feel that a lot of people just really want to get it out there and say it. I find that when I host shows, that sometimes, something does go in another direction, and sometimes that direction is really interesting and and the information needs to be out there for people. So it's always good to stay in the moment is how I look at it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like I said, that's why I sort of allow these things to always develop organically. And, so, you know, I was looking over a few things, and I don't know where you want to go from here, but believe me, there's always a million things to discuss. And I know you were trying to get a few things out there, and between me and Roger, you know, we both like to talk, so.
Oh, no problem. I mean, you know, it's in a sense, sometimes it's less work for you. I hear myself talk all the time. So, I mean, it's always good to, there's always a flow of a conversation. So I wasn't really sure, exactly how it was going to unfold. For some reason I forgot that he was taken off for the second hour. So, but, one of the things that I have most recently is, I did get an opportunity to connect on a couple of shows with the people down in, Bundy Ranch. And, that was, really fascinating and informative to find out or to be connected to the real story, to hear people that are actually out there right now. Stephen D. Kelly, he does the Stephen D. Kelly show on Revolution Radio, had them on his show, and then he pulled me into that show along with the producer or the owner of Revolution Radio, Nighthawk. They're actually doing a fundraiser on the station to help them because they're still out there fighting the good fight, and it's getting hot out there now. They need ice and water and tents and swamp coolers and things like that because it could get really dangerous for them on some levels. But it's definitely ongoing. One of the things that really moved me on my own interview was that it was with two women, and it was a bit emotional. I mean, they said that when the guns were pulled, they had guns on children, and that is just not acceptable. And they even called their own local police, dialed 911 to have help for this. And the police force was told not to respond, or the 911 was told not to respond to the call, as well as having the police come out. And they brought this up on their local town meeting, which, by the way, I should get you the link on that. But it was, they sent me the link to it, and there was a town meeting where, the police officer, one of the women went up to Lisa Marie, said, "How could you do this? How could you allow a child? How could you let us be endangered? You're supposed to protect and serve us. You're supposed to be our protector." And the police officer actually broke down, admitting to the fact that he's working for them and that he needed to do this and that for his family, and thought that what they wanted him to do was in the right. But now he sees that he should have came out and helped them, and that it was wrong to withhold help.
Right. Now, this is an interesting situation because, to be honest with you, most of the people that we've heard speak about this, and even the people that have gone down there. I mean, one guy from our network was down there for a bit, also. But I mean, it's been men all along, pretty much, that we've been hearing from about this topic, on the ground and all that. So, who exactly are these women anyway? I mean, how did they come into this situation?
Well, one of the women's name is Patricia Eichen, and the other lady is Lisa Marie, and they're just people that are that want to be involved and support, and they're part of what's happening down there. They're local Nevadans, and they live in the area. And one of the ladies, Patricia Eichen, is actually friends with Nighthawk from Revolution Radio. Excuse me. So there's that connection there. And I think we might actually be down there too as well, covering some stuff. Our station too. So so it was just one of those things. I don't know how to explain it. It's just like that. I ended up getting connected to the women, and I feel that episode is I don't know if the right word is special in that way, but it is interesting to hear from women and what their take on it is, and how they are concerned about the children and why they are there. They're there for liberty. They're there because they feel an injustice has been done to them. And it's not just the Bundy ranchers, it's all ranchers. It's happening in other places as well. And they really do see this as a liberty issue, and they're fighting to keep America mainly what America really is, or what we have believed it to be.
Well, yeah, and the thing is, it's just a unique perspective because, again, like I said, it was mostly men, and what has been blown up all throughout all media, it seems to me, is a whole lot of guys who are militia guys coming from outside of the area there to support him, and there were certain media people, let's just leave it at that were going down there to cover it. From whatever side that they were standing on, but mostly we were dealing with men, and we weren't dealing with locals very often, except the few people that got to speak with the Bundy family. But to actually, first of all, speak to two women and also speak to two people that were involved locally, because it is one of their neighbors and it is an issue for them as a community. That makes a big difference as far as the perspective, and and it got really emotional.
Definitely is. Yes, they cried. They cried when they talked about the guns being on the children. The women cried about that. It hurt their hearts to witness it and to have the children witness it. And yes, there are children there. And there are also men who are not a part of the militia or who are not ranchers, but they are local community. There was a man that has he was on Stephen D. Kelly's show, and they had, offered, he has ice machine company that ice machines at different hotels and things like that, and just is out there to support them. He was out there during when the big showdown happened. His son is with him, and his son's only 20 years old, and the son confessed on the radio. Why are you there? They go, do you realize that you're risking your life? He goes, absolutely, I'm risking my life. I know that I'm risking my life, but you know what? I believe in this so much that I'm willing to have that happen to stand up for our rights. He's 20 years old.
Mm.
And there's some people that are, they're out there facilitating food, working in the kitchen. It's a little bit like Occupy, where they've got their tents and they're making sure that everybody eats and is hydrated, and they're on, they're out there to make their stance. And right now it's a lot community. The militia, I don't believe, is really there at the moment. Maybe they are. I should ask that question to be specific. But all that has calmed down at some point, but the fight's not over. Now, there have been rumors, I've looked at certain articles on YouTube and, articles that are circulating about the fact that, there's a lot of federal agents and, the BLM are now all staying in the hotels and this and that. And I said, is that true? I mean, are you noticing that they're camped out in these hotel rooms and stuff like that? And Patricia mentioned that, she's really doesn't really know, and she's really not wanting to get into that be paranoid about that. So I'm not really sure if those statements are real or not.
Yeah, that's kind of hard to know. I mean, I saw the same stuff circulate, and it went all over the place. I mean, there were videos, and there was also just, stuff being put up on social media, I guess what we would call memes that sort of, outlined that story, that they were starting to move in the troops very quietly and that they were staying at the local hotels and all this kind of stuff. But I mean, the outside influence thing, it has died down as far as I understand. But then again, it has been very hard to get myself to get a hold of some local people there to really find out, how it's going now, because obviously the mainstream has kind of turned away from it. He's sort of just mentioned as a sidebar now to other supposedly racially charged situations, because of those comments that were made and all that.
Yes. I think that happened between the last time you and I talked. Because if I can remember right, we actually brought up the subject matter then, and then that came out. It hurt to see it happen. It made me angry that, the mainstream media was not there when the big showdown happened. No coverage. Maybe they were there, but it wasn't aired. My family, I sent my mom stuff that I knew on the internet. Look, have you seen this yet? Because I think this is, we need to take I'm recommending you take a look at the situation. And then, a week later or a week and a half later, 2 weeks later, ooh, boom, all of a sudden, he's a racist. and you don't hear the real story about it. I mean, I literally have gone to friends at their house right before the whole racist thing came out, and I go, hey, look at this. And we're looking at videos, and she's like, why don't I know about this? Why don't I know about this? And so the fact that that's actually taken place, just the fact that that's taken place, makes me realize that they're lying. That's my opinion about it.
Yeah, no, I understand it. And, you know, but it's very typical because here's the thing. Whether it's true or not, it's irrelevant because it's just a mechanism by which that they are trying to demonize him to make him a little less attractive to those who don't want to be associated with that sort of thing.
Yes.
You know, this is the problem. I mean, it's very much like the blacklisting that has gone on in various places, in various industries, where once you are painted with a certain brush, a whole lot of people will walk away from you. You won't get the funding, or you won't get the opportunities anymore. You won't get the support of the public if they can keep doing these things. I mean, you know, it's really typical of when someone becomes an agitator of one sort or another. When somebody starts to challenge the system in any way, shape, or form, usually there is a character assassination. Sometimes there's a physical assassination, but normally there's either a partial or complete character assassination that occurs. Even as far back as, you know, I mean, not in my lifetime, a little bit sooner, a little bit before my time, but even so, something that could be observed in more recent history is, you know, even Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the threat of bringing out various things to sort of smear him, some things being true, some things not. You know, this is a typical tactic that's utilized by people that seek to shut down opposition. So that's exactly how I saw it. Whether it was true or not was really irrelevant to me, because just the way it was played out and the way it was played up just sort of stunk to me of that tactic.
They're hiding something. I mean, the tactic signifies that they're hiding something. And we've seen it before. We've seen it with marijuana and propaganda. And we're still dealing with that. I mean, it really makes it, there are certain things that I feel that trigger people to have a reaction or a belief system. And, you know, you say it 2 or 3 times over and over again, and boom, it's in your brain. And that's a process of the way we you repeat something over and over, and it becomes a fact for people psychologically. And that's exactly what they do. And, you know, I was even driving yesterday. I drove to a comedy gig last night, and on the way there, I noticed a billboard that said, domestic terrorists, what do we do with them? Or something to that effect. And I was like, really? Who paid for that?
Oh yeah, I hear you there. I mean, and I took, you know, just based, I'm not really focused on the marijuana thing, but I do tell you this. I noticed a few weeks ago that there was a new campaign that seemed to be sweeping through the mainstream, where they were trying to, you know, sort of focus on, like bad behavior and link it to marijuana again.
Uh-huh.
Where it's like, look, it's legal in this state, but look what's happening. Off the top of my head, there was like a mom who left a kid on top of her car or something and drove away. The kid was in a car seat on top of her car. And,
but this happened like years ago.
Oh, no, but this was only recently again.
Right. But I mean, like in real life, without even putting marijuana attached to it. I mean, that story is an old story. Now they just slap marijuana over it.
Well, but that's the thing, is they take all these sort of bad behavior things, these sensational, you know, bad mother, abusive, people, guy shoots his girlfriend, whatever it is. And then it's like, but look, that's where the marijuana is legal. You say it's not killing anyone, you know, and this is
misinformation.
This is the propaganda again, because, and they started, as a matter of fact, in, I think it was Colorado they were trying to focus on, and Washington, obviously, because the two of them most notably recently, you know, almost at the same time became the 2 states to legalize it for recreational use. So it was an obvious point. And, you know, you can find people behaving badly anywhere, with or without substances. You can find irresponsible and negligent individuals everywhere on the planet, believe me. It's not, you don't have to have a drug, you know, in your system to be this way either. And it's just one of those things that I noticed starting to try, and I don't think they got a lot of traction with it recently, but I guarantee you're going to see it again. Another string of deaths.
Over it though. It's like, that's what I feel like. It's like, we're not stupid anymore. I mean, the recent poll is that most people believe it should be legalized in this country. And we've way swung over in the other direction. We almost laugh at them because, there's the counter information that's going on. When people look at articles circulating all through Facebook about how it's curing cancer and, epilepsy in little kids and this and that and hemp. I mean, the truth is actually coming out there. So it's like to see Nancy Gray do a show on marijuana, and how bad it is and the way in which she conducted herself. She looks Looney Tunes, and I do feel, especially if more people are smoking marijuana, we're going to look at that and go, no way.
I got you. I guess I never mentioned Nancy Grace to you, huh?
Yeah. Oh, no,
Okay, you know what? I keep asking the same question, and nobody will answer it for me. Maybe you can. Every time I see her on TV, I want to know what the hell is wrong with her head.
Yeah.
I can't figure it out, but she starts to go into these spasms, and it just doesn't look natural. I mean, I've said stuff on Facebook and on my show before. I don't understand it. I don't know what's wrong with her. Something, and it's not, we're not making an aesthetic judgment here. There is something literally wrong there, not like ugly's one thing. I mean, I'm talking about there is something physically wrong with this woman that I can't wrap my mind around it. Something is disturbing my visual cues when looking at her on the screen. I don't think it's the tone in her voice, but there is something there where it just does not look natural when she's moving and speaking.
Maybe she's a holographic image.
It could be. It could, look, these are theories.
Right.
These are theories. She could be a holograph. She could be some sort of nanotech meat puppet. I don't know. But the thing is, I just don't know what the hell's wrong with her head. I'm sorry. But every time, I swear to you, if I turn and just catch a glimpse of her in a commercial or anything else, I stop and I look at whoever is sitting next to me, and I swear to you, I say, what is wrong with her head?
She's one step away from Morton Downey Jr. I mean, if you remember him,
Oh, you just brought, yes. See, now look, I lived in the New York and New Jersey area, so he had that little show originally before he got, big and went all over the place with the whole Channel 9 thing.
Yeah.
That was in New Jersey, so I was watching that show locally. Oh, I would have to say that had to be the mid-'80s. Yeah, that had to be the mid-'80s when he...
Or Wally George. Do you remember Wally George?
Oh my... Yes. Oh, see, here we go. Now we're getting into some weird stuff here, but...
Rebecca George is his daughter, that didn't want to speak to him. Yeah. I almost got on that show one day. Thank God it didn't happen.
Oh my. That would still be floating around on YouTube somewhere if you did.
Right.
You know that, right?
Yeah. Well, I was just starting stand up and, fairly new. And he had Rhonda Shear. I don't know if anybody remembers a woman, named Rhonda Shear. She used to host a show called Rhonda Shear Up All Night. And, I think she did some movie called Basic Training. She's kind of like, I mean, I like her too. She's a comedian, but she was on that, Hollywood trail, farm thing, kind of like, Pamela Anderson. They had the same managers in bathing suit poses, all that kind of stuff going on. And, anyway, she got invited on the show and she brought a few of us with her. And the whole thing is that Wally George didn't think women are funny. And, but you go and you realize that he's not real. He knows he's not real. And it's all this like bizarre, almost like wrestling, and the audience is all out there and they've got like this weird cult following, and it's tongue in cheek, but the thing of it is I feel that some people don't know it's tongue in cheek.
No, there were people that were really taking guys like him and Morton Downey Jr. is another guy. He's passed away now, but I mean, they were taking him seriously. Like, I literally sat in a room with men older than myself. I mean, guys who should have known better, looking at this guy, and I'm going, this looks like a drill sergeant and a bad, like, B-rated professional wrestler somewhere on an independent wrestling federation. This is what I'm looking at when he would get in people's faces and scream at them and all that.
Yeah.
And, the weird thing was there were people looking at me and they were grown. I mean, I was a kid. They were grown men looking at him and saying, this guy ought to run for governor and he ought to run for, I'm like, really? This is what you think should be in charge? You can't tell that this is not, I mean, if that was real, then somebody should have either medicated him or put him in a straitjacket after every show. I mean, and I don't normally support people being medicated, but if that was real, he needed to be medicated.
Well, look at what happened during that era. You have Maury Povich, and then you had Geraldo Rivera. Phil Donahue, Sally Jesse Raphael.
See, that's where I was going. They started to sensationalize, the Phil Donahue format is what happened. And Oprah was the most successful out of all of them, but she came after Donahue also.
Yeah, she followed his format. That was a very popular format, and it's still kind of out there today on some level. But when you start to look at it, Maury, how is it that Maury Povich, isn't he like married to a real journalist? I mean, how is it that she can stand what he does for a living? Unless,
See, I wondered that when he was doing A Current Affair, how Connie Chung put up with him.
Isn't it Connie Chen or something like that? Or isn't he married, he's married to someone really prominent, that was a real legitimate anchor person.
Right, Connie Chung.
Connie Chung, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it was. And when he used to do A Current Affair, like I said, I was still looking at it like, how did this happen?
Yeah, I guess opposites attract.
Well, who knows? But then again, people evolve and people devolve, and Maury kind of devolved, and well, so did Bill O'Reilly because he used to do Inside Edition. But anyway.
Oh, I know. I mean, and look where, and what really saddens me is, I guess Keith Olbermann got in trouble apparently, but now he's doing sports again. So they go, well, you were here, but we'll shove you here and give you a spot here, but you're too little outlandish here. And I don't know. I mean, it really begins to look deceitful. And bizarre. And the fact that we, listen to it and some people actually look at it as being factual is beyond me. But maybe the pharmaceuticals play into play, or, the fluoride in our water, or, I don't know. I mean, I just can't figure out, and again, maybe we're talking about the lowest common denominator of people who may not be awake yet. But it just seems to go in increments. It's like there's the Maury Povich and the reality show people, and then it goes on, to people that feel that they know the news and they feel that they're up on it and they're liberal and they're into equality and no racism and all that kind of stuff, but they're still ready to regurgitate all the liberal ideas based on the fact that because it still did come from CNN. Mm-hmm. And there's even a pompousness about it, well, I'm in the know because Rachel Maddow said it. And I'm like, no, you're not, you're not questioning things. And one of the things that really, was frustrating to me, like one day, I mean, I even told a friend, I go, I can't even talk about this with you anymore. I'm just agitated about it, was about when the first videos came out with Cliven Bundy and the whole racism thing. Mm-hmm. And my argument was going, well, look at the article, look at the video. Do you hear the question that came up in front of it? Do you hear anything at the end? No, it's completely taken out of context. And then an article is written around it to frame what the reality is. And I'm sorry, but that's not enough for me to make a decision like that, or to just put it out like it's nothing. And then another thing, and I'm who knows, I don't know if this angers people or not, but my point was, the issue really isn't about racism. It's about land. And the fact that all of a sudden that's even been brought into the picture as even being a part of the entire thing looks like it's being manipulated. But when I say that to some of my friends they still don't hear me. So that's when I go, I can't even have this conversation anymore. I want to keep loving you. So let's just drop it for a second, you know?
Well, yeah, no, I totally understand. You know, if you want to give yourself, you know, Excedrin headache number 99,
yeah,
all you got to do is get one of those, and I call them parrots, I'm sorry, but get yourself a Maddow parrot on your left shoulder and get yourself, like, say, an O'Reilly parrot on your right shoulder. And I do mean just get yourself stuck in a restaurant booth, you know, one of those ones where you can only get out from the two sides, and get one of those friends each on one side of you that happens to believe the left or the right wing dogma. And you will go completely nuts, because at this point, you know exactly why they're fighting each other. You know exactly what the pointlessness is to most of the argument. And they are just wasting your energy in listening. You know, your ability to listen, your power to hear is being absolutely misused by this nonsense, because you see it as nothing but nonsense and static anymore. It makes it hard to make friends sometimes, Terry.
It does. And then what's frustrating to me, like if I do get into a discussion, then sometimes they're nasty about it and they get angry and they put you down and they say things like, do your research. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I've been looking at this since day one. Where have you been? You know what I mean? Just because I have a different opinion than you do, and also different facts that I'm looking at, doesn't necessarily mean that my argument is not as credible as yours.
And in fact, you know, if you the worst thing in the world, though, is that when you actually have sources to cite, this is why it was so important that we brought this up with Roger earlier about being able to make the citation, being able to give the footnotes to the story. Is here's the thing: you have yours. Ask them for theirs after they challenge you. Where did you get this from? I promise you there is nothing even remotely like a primary source that they got it from. They heard it from one of the talking heads. They heard it from the radio. They saw it on a newspaper article that they don't recall which newspaper, where it was, anything. They don't have, it's like a nebulous sort of amalgamation of an idea created from these fragments that are scattered in that stream of nonsense. And they don't understand that that's what they have. And meanwhile, I'm saying, listen, I looked at a scientific study. I talked to a person. I checked on the official record of this. And they look at you like you're completely nuts. Because after all, since they believe that they are morally upstanding right-wing citizens, Bill O'Reilly said it, it must be true. They believe that they are caring, compassionate liberals. Rachel Maddow said it, it must be true. It's absolutely mind-blowing when you can start to dissect this stuff for yourself. And it sounds to me like you're dissecting it for yourself and saying, well, look, here's what I see when I open it up. And they're telling you, nope, you've got the wrong animal.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was basically told, well, you know, all you guys that are, you know, all the people that are supporting this are going to be ashamed later on. I'm like, really? Okay. You know, and by the way, the people that are supporting it, I suppose Revolution Radio is just going to be absolutely ashamed for raising money for the cause. And if you do want to be part of that shame, please do go to the website, make a donation and help these people. You know, if you do care, if you want to, you know, if you want to put a little, if you have an overflow of money, or, you know, and any donation, and there's nothing too small. You know, $1 can get, you know, a bottle of water. And so all of it is put to good use. But I'm kind of like trailing off on that, but I just wanted to do one little plug on that and in support of it, because, you know, they don't have, you know, major corporations or senators making potential deals with China or whatever the real story is on all of this and why this is happening. But it's definitely, frustrating, to kind of, deal with it. I even had another friend of mine say, well, and he gave me, someone wrote a commentary or a blog on it, which just like any one of us could be doing. And, he had a little bit of a more open-minded attitude towards it, but it was still slanted, in my opinion, towards what the mainstream media is reiterating. And he says, oh, well, he would be a lot more interesting to have on your show than the actual Bundy Ranch people. I'm like, how is this more interesting? To me, it's like, why not? If you really want to get to the source of what's going on, I don't really want to hear, some person's opinion who's, probably still in the bourgeois category, sipping on a glass of wine and writing from their PhD, repertoire. And I'm not saying like people with degrees don't matter, but just because somebody seems to be intellectual and able to hold, great conversations at a party or dinner and known for being a well-written thinker doesn't necessarily mean that they're giving the true facts or even opinions that have anything to do with what's really going on.
Well, right. It doesn't even mean that they've even begun to search for the facts, that they've begun to do anything other than accept, a particular set of ideas. And sometimes there is no idea about it. I've seen some of these people, and I'll just give you one quick example. One of the more what they call left-wing historians at this point, his name is Noam Chomsky. And anytime that he is confronted with the idea, because he's considered, a great American historian in the mainstream, anytime he's ever confronted about any of the topics that involved, like, say, the assassination of John F. Kennedy, he basically discounts it and sort of just shoos the whole thing away as being inconsequential. So, because he says it's inconsequential and not even worth looking at the research or worth looking at what's been unearthed, uncovered, added to the historical record, et cetera, post 1964, that's the end of his entire thought process on the case. And that is not necessarily the reality. Simply because the man has, his multiple degrees and he's, a lauded historian or a lauded anything. The people that are on the news and everything else that some people seem to trust because they agree with them. That's the thing. And that's why I was glad also that Roger used the term comfort zone, because a lot of times people don't seek to find the facts or don't seek to find the objective journalist. They just simply look for someone that agrees with their preconceived notions more than the others. So they look for someone that they think believes the same types of things that they do, and then they just put their trust or their faith in them. And this is absolutely counterintuitive to any sort of, cognitive reasoning.
Yes, I agree with you. And again, maybe that's because we all have a natural, I'm just guessing, a natural need to want to fit into some sort of collective thought, because we check base with each other to see, well, does this sound okay to you? Again, I'm thinking of it, that Gandhi phrase is coming up to me right now, and I'm probably going to misquote it, but it's like, who cares if nobody understands, if only for yourself that you know the truth. The truth is the truth.
Well, right. And here's the thing. The reason why that worked for him is because he was comfortable with the truth within himself. And people seek comfort. Comfort is a good thing. Comfort is a nice thing. But here's the problem. When you get comfortable in a blanket because it's nice and soft, if it's filled with smallpox, you're still going to get sick. Yeah. It's just that simple. So a lot of times it's better to have clean comfort, whether it's intellectually or physically or otherwise. And here is the problem. Too many people have gotten very comfortable in a very sort of ill world, and that's from the environmental, the environmental concerns to the food concerns to the psychosocial concerns, all of them. You've gotten comfortable in a world that's really not healthy. And the sooner that you can extract yourself, and I don't mean you, Terry, but because you're doing that. I mean, obviously you're taking those steps. But what I'm saying is the majority of people out there seem to have gotten themselves nice and comfortable in an unhealthy world, one way or another.
Yes, sometimes, and again, I speak, and like, we understand, we're on the same page, we're examining the same types of things, and so are a lot of my friends, our new friends too, that I've been making through being a part of the new media. I said new media, and,
yep, you got it that time.
But, there are several other people that, that are involved in, that aren't, that I know as comedians. That's a whole other world, and then there's another world going on here, and the Facebook friends and family and things like that. My mom is starting to open up and start to examining some stuff. There are some things that I feel that almost like as if it's too emotional for her to even look at this point. Some people may not be okay right now and emotionally to be able to handle some of the information, and maybe that's why they shut it off. Sometimes I'll talk to people, they start to fall asleep, and I'm like, wow, I'm a comedian, I shouldn't be that boring to people. But I realize that that they can't. They have to disconnect because they're not ready to hear it yet. Doesn't mean that they're not going to be able to hear it later on or however. So that's kind of, I'm working on also being sensitive to people and working on having compassion when I get attacked or I get funky things. I go, what, they just don't really know yet.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to sort of resign yourself to planting seeds that you are hopeful will germinate later. Because, trying to simply drag someone away from what they're familiar with is so very hard. And it doesn't even necessarily, I hate to use this analogy, but there are plenty of people that are involved in, say, unhealthy relationships or unhealthy activities that are doing damage to them, that have gotten so accustomed to it, have gotten so familiar with it, that it's very hard, that even if it's killing them, they don't want to extract themselves because it is familiar. It's something they know. Some people have, thrown back at me the analogy of, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. And that's true. But here's the thing. You don't necessarily need to make a Faustian bargain to live. So therein lies the problem. And sometimes, yes, you do have to be, compassionate, true, but also very empathetic, because you must understand that all of us at one time or another, no matter what level of sort of awakening we have reached, at one point or another, almost everyone I've ever known, and I'm telling you, I'm waiting to meet the person that from the day they were born was completely aware of the real world around them, because we all sort of accepted certain constructs at one point or another, and all of us had to go through our own unique process to begin to even decouple ourselves from that. So sometimes you have to be patient about it, and it's hard because, especially when you care about someone, you just want them to at least begin to open their eyes so they can see the dangers around them, because you don't want to see the damage done to them that is coming.
Well, and the school systems too, and they don't teach us. We're not taught how to think on our own. We're not taught to question things. Actually, when we do question things, we get smacked down.
Right. Critical thought is almost punished, and conformity is rewarded.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I remember when, my mom's an educator or a retired educator, and we just discussed this recently. When I was in kindergarten, I had some problems. And one of the things, now looking back, realizing what was really taking place was, one of the complaints I got from my teacher was that, we were instructed to make a pig, and it was supposed to only be one pig, but I made the whole family, and when they were presenting this for my mom, they go, and she says, oh, they were the whole sizes, and the mom and the dad, and, the two kids, and all this kind of stuff, and my mom being a teacher, she says, well, she's thinking out of she's creative. She took it to the level that she wanted to go to, and she saw it as being a really good thing. But that was one of the reasons why I needed to be held back.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
For literally taking a project and completing the project, but expanding upon it.
Yes. And, yeah. And also, and another thing too was, it was Easter, and they go, and so I painted an Easter bunny and the eggs, but I didn't know black canceled out all the other colors. You live and learn when you're just a little person, 4 or 5 years old, what do you know? So the picture all turned out black. So they were like, well, there's something wrong with her. She's morbid. And my mom said, well, what happened? I go, well, there's the bunny rabbit. It's in the dark time. They come out at nighttime to put the eggs. And, so they were trying to make me seem that there was something wrong with me and stuff. Yeah. And I didn't take instruction properly. I didn't follow the rules right already at the age of, cause I guess I wasn't quite 5 when I started school. So I was actually a little bit underage. So what they did was they had me go to reading kindergarten, which was between, kindergarten and first grade. And then after that, I became a good student and, got good grades and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I went into the system.
You learned your lesson.
Yeah.
That, creativity is not to be tolerated.
Well, I stayed creative. It seemed like I got past it. I got to write stories and stuff like that. And, there eventually as you go on, there's other outlets. But again, there's that, sign of, you need to conform. You need to be sitting over here. And, at some point that is going to affect you. And I feel that there's some of us that are just going to flat out rebel. We cannot do it. And I believe that some people are much more easily programmed, for it.
Well, yeah. And here's the thing. Roger is very fond of saying that there is, no patent on liberty in this country, but I like to add to that by saying that individualism should never be a crime either. And, punishing, creativity and punishing the unique is not something that should go on. And, that's a small example that you're presenting there of this sort of attitude that conformity is the only thing that should be rewarded. If you fall into line with the expectations that are, supposedly society's expectations of you, then you're to be rewarded. But you know what the truth is that there is no reward except that which you value. And that in and of itself probably speaks way too much to the individual and probably speaks way too much to the idea of actual liberty. And I don't mean just the semantic arguments about what is liberty and what is not liberty, but the idea of being free, the idea of being allowed to sort of be yourself and to, express yourself is just one of those things that's just no longer encouraged. And, whether it be through critical thought or whether it be through, actually being someone who is a nonconformist, who is, unique and a problem solver that doesn't necessarily solve things with the equations that are supposed to be demanded of us, it seems. These things are not supposed to be a crime. They're not supposed to be punishable. They're really just the results of being human.
Well, what would life be like if everybody would be able to, every little child, every person was allowed, or it was upheld to unleash your creativity, your creative genius, the thoughts and the imagination within? What would our world look like? Who are we suppressing from contributing to society in a positive way?
See, that's an even further thought, is if we actually were to take off those psychological and emotional shackles, from ourselves from an early age, yeah, we would have an entirely different landscape that we were looking at. And you know what I'm willing to bet is that if these control mechanisms were not in place on so many of us from day one, we would have a much healthier place to live, all of us. I really think that.
One time I was on a bus. I'd gone to see a Liza Minnelli concert at the Hollywood Bowl, and they take these shuttle buses back to where your car is. And I listened to these women behind me, and they were talking about their children in school, and they go, "Well, we can't do anything about the Easter Bunny because it's religious, and we can't do St. Patrick's Day because because of something." And then they go, and then they can't use the word imagination because the word magic is in it, and that might have a connotation of something. And I go, are you kidding me? They're wanting to take the word imagination out of the vocabulary or they're not allowing them to even use the word in school.
Actually giving the word imagination a negative connotation.
Right. And I'm saying, well, what about John Lennon's song Imagine? I guess that's not going to be played there, is it?
Well, no, those are very dangerous lyrics, Terry. Those are extremely dangerous lyrics. Imagine all the people. Now, how can he possibly imagine all the people? That is a very scary thought.
But we can.
Of course we can.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, when people begin to argue over the silly minutia of language and they begin to take such great offense. I mean, you can take offense to nearly any sort of a descriptive word, any sort of a specific word, because, if you're being specific about something and you're describing a very small grouping or you're describing an individual, who have you left out? You can twist language in so many different ways. I mean, I really need to have a linguistics expert on one night to just go over sort of the distortion of the English language in recent times, I think. Because
that would be interesting.
There is practically an endless array of ways that really innocuous words have been turned into something negative. And listen, we only have about 5 minutes left. And I wanted to make sure, because I know I put it on the Facebook posts and a couple other places in the chat room. I put up a link to your Freedom of Joyce blog.
Thank you.
And also, but you know what? I always do forget, and I've had you on twice now, and I forget about the radio show.
Yes, actually, I've got 2 different radio shows, and one of them is called Freedom of Joyce, which is on Revolution Radio. I'm on Fridays at 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And also it replays on These Changing Times, which is at thechangiestime.com. Also, Revolution Radio is at freedomslips.com. And that plays on 7 p.m. Central Time. And then I've got a show 3 nights a week. It's Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday mornings from 12 a.m. to 2 a.m. And it's called Hollywood Hemptress Hour on the Time for Hemp Network, which is the only pro-cannabis, and we're also on iHeartRadio, so we're the only pro-cannabis network on iHeartRadio in association. And so you can find that at timeforhemp.com.
And, UCY.TV radio is what you guys are listening to right now. Just so you know, I did forget to do my ID, except at the very beginning of the show, but I get lost in conversation sometimes. But, you can find us on TuneIn and a whole bunch of other different apps, by the way, which I was recently playing around with, just so everybody knows. And, of course, it also drops to my SoundCloud and all that later on. But if you go to the Ochelli Effect page and you just click on a date, you can always find, I think it's 10 archived shows that are up there at all times. And, I really appreciate you coming on with us, Terry. And you know what else? One of these times we're going to have to just discuss your comedy, because I started to watch some of those clips.
Uh-huh.
Because actually, when you go to the Freedom of Joyce blog, you can find video clips of Terry's comedy as well as some of her commentary. There's an article on there. There's a few playable video clips on the site, though. I haven't watched them all, but I've watched a few.
Thank you.
I gotta say the one hairdo scared me a little bit, though, because I wasn't sure what was going on there with the spiky thing that was happening, but pretty interesting visual. If you go there and check it out, you guys will see what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that was my past look when I was on Last Comic Standing. I was going to a lot of goth clubs and dancing around in Hollywood, so I was very alternative at that time.
That's
now
definitely.
I'm new now.
Right. We got to leave the alternative word out of it from now on because it is the new media and it is just as legitimate as the old media or the quote unquote mainstream. You know what? Forget about the stream. All the water eventually flows together, doesn't it? So here's the thing. There is fresh water and there is salt water. And you know what? We're more like the freshwater media. We are the new media. And this is the way it's going to have to be. I'll tell you what else. It has been a real pleasure having you on. And, you know, I could probably sit and cover a million things with you. That's at the age of 19 in 1962, she was
See, but I have the files. You know, I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, how can that be possible? The brain, you know, chemicals and frontal slab of choice. I don't know what that was. Internet, professional wrestler, and not just even tourist style. It doesn't matter where the information comes from as long as it's real. It doesn't. It's hard to get real information because seriously, they don't want you to have degrees to together whenever I try to prove